In today's video, we're going to tie a Hogan's S&M Nymph. It's a small little mayfly nymph, has a little bit of flash to it. You want to make sure you tie this fly slender, fairly sparse. You don't want to make it too fat, too bulky. We're going to start with a Daiichi 1560 nymph hook. You could also use a standard dry fly hook like a 1180 as well. We're going to use kind of an undersized bead as well, 5/64 copper bead for like a size 16, maybe a 3/32 for a size 14. And we're going to start with some 8/0 Veevus olive thread. We just start it right up by the bead. And the first material that we're going to tie in is going to be the tail fibers. And for this, I'm just going to take 3 little pheasant tail fibers. I'm just going to peel them away from a tail section here. And I want to even up the tips of those fibers as even as I can get them. When we tie in this tail, we want this tail to be about the length of the straight portion of the shank of the hook, not counting the bead. So once I roughly measure them out, we can just lash them to the top of the hook, and I'm just going to wrap back up onto those tail fibers. And then when I get to the back, a little trick that I like to do, it's not necessary, but I like to kind of push them up with my finger. And I take a single wrap of thread underneath them, and that'll just kind of help prop up those tail fibers and also help kind of splay them. So you can see there it kind of helps split them up, make it look like a little mayfly tail. Like I said, it's not necessary, but sometimes those little things just make your fly look a little better. Then we're going to take some small wire in an olive green color. We're going to tie that in along the side of the shank of the hook. And I'm going to do this with very nice even wraps of thread. I don't want any lumps or bumps or any cracks. I want it to be perfectly even all the way back there to the tail. Then I'm going to take the thread and work it forward. That's the trick to this fly. Nice, slender, even wraps. I'm going to take that wire and I'm going to counter wrap it around the shank of the hook, kind of the opposite way that I wrapped the thread. This helps make this fly a little more durable, but it also helps that wire really stand out on top of the thread. Then I'm going to capture it with several tight wraps of thread. You can spiral the wire out of there. Now we're going to wrap back up onto some of that wire. I'm going to go about a bead's length away from the bead there. About right there will work. Then I'm going to take a brown Goose Biot. You can also use turkey if you like. I'm just going to take a single brown Goose Biot and I'm going to tie it in right on top of the hook shank so that it's centered right on the top. Then I'm going to wrap back onto it here until I have roughly a bead's length, or a little bit more than a bead's length. You don't want to quite go halfway. You want to keep about 2/3 of that back half of that body intact. Only about 1/3 of it's going to be thorax. Now we're going to take our dubbing. I'm just going to use an Antron blend, and I like to use a dubbing that's a bit darker than the body thread. I like a two-tone look. Now, don't have to do that. I'm not sure what Hogan Brown does or what he likes, but I like mine to be two-tone, so I use a bit darker dubbing for the thorax than I would on other flies maybe, just so that it's darker than the body. And I just kind of build up a little nice tight ball, just like that. Now we're going to take 3 strands of a olive or peacock, any type of kind of shade of green Krystal flash. I think this is Peacock that we're using here. We're just going to tie this in right on top of the shank of the hook. If I can grab this slippery stuff with my thread. Oh, come on, cooperate with me. There we go. And you're going to do kind of figure X wraps on that Krystal flash, just to lock it down into place. Just like that, right on top of the shank. Then we're going to take that Biot, I'm going to grab it real careful, pull it over the top, pull the legs back. I'm going to capture that Biot with my thread. Just 2 wraps is really all you need, because we're going to whip finish right on top of those wraps. Pull it down snug. Now when you trim this Biot, Hogan likes to leave a little bit of a tag. Kind of imitates just the little head of the fly. It's also easier to do than getting in there super tight. Also, it keeps it from coming off as well. Sometimes if you trim that real flush to the thread, that little wing casing will just be the first thing that pops off. Now we need to trim our legs. For this fly, I like to trim them just about the length of the body. You can trim them a little shorter if you like them a little shorter. The length of the body is about as long as I would go. And that's all there is to the Hogan's S&M Nymph. Great little mayfly pattern. Nice and slender. Works on tailwaters out here in Colorado pretty well. Also works on freestones as well. It's a little blue and olive nymph. And that's all there is to the Hogan S&M Nymph.